You know, the book of Acts isn't some dusty, ancient scroll. It's really the action-packed origin story of how a tiny, hunted group on the very fringes of the Roman Empire just exploded into a global force that would completely reshape the world. So let's dive in and see how this all went down. Everything that happens next is all mapped out in this one single sentence. It was a final command, and it's both a mission statement and a prophecy. The whole story just explodes outward from one single point: Jerusalem. Like a ripple in a pond, getting bigger and bigger, moving in three distinct circles. So, our story kicks off in that first circle, Jerusalem. And you have to picture the scene. The city is basically a powder keg. A small, kind of bewildered group of followers are pretty much hiding out, just clinging to this one promise that they would soon receive some kind of mysterious power from on high. And when I say small, I mean small. This wasn't an army. The entire movement, at this very moment, consisted of about 120 people. That's it, all gathered together in the single upper room, just waiting. This tiny group is the nucleus of everything that's about to happen. And then, on the day of Pentecost, the waiting is over. A sound like a hurricane just rips through the room. Something that looks like tongues of fire appears and rests on each person, and then they start speaking in languages they have never learned before. It was just baffling to the huge international crowd that had gathered in the city for the festival. So the Apostle Peter, he stands up and just delivers this electrifying speech to the crowd, explaining that this bizarre, incredible event is actually the fulfillment of an ancient prophecy. And get this, by the end of that one single day, this many people had joined them. They went from 120 people to over 3,000 in a matter of hours. The spark had definitely found its kindling. But the radical part wasn't just their numbers, it was how they lived. This new community started living in a way that just completely defied the norms of the time. They pooled all their resources. They sold their own property to create this fund to take care of anyone in need. Now, you have to remember, this was a world with no social safety net. So this message of radical equality and taking care of each other, well, it was incredibly powerful. It was a social revolution just as much as it was a religious one. So you can probably guess what happens next. A rapidly growing countercultural movement operating right in the heart of the city's religious life. Yeah, that did not go unnoticed. The very same authorities who had just executed their leader now saw his followers gaining influence at a truly alarming rate. And here's the flashpoint. Peter and John are at the temple, and they encounter a man who had been unable to walk his entire life. With these words, Peter heals him, right there in front of everyone. It created a total sensation, earning the apostles massive popular support. And, of course, the full hostile attention of the ruling council. At first, it's just a warning, stop talking about this. Then it escalates to a beating. But the movement just keeps on growing. So finally, the authorities decide to make an example out of a charismatic leader named Stephen. He gives this incredibly defiant speech, and for that, he's dragged outside the city and executed by stoning. He becomes the very first martyr, and that act unleashes an all-out persecution against everyone in the Jerusalem church. Now, here's a crucial detail. The text makes a point to tell us that watching over the coats of the executioners is a young, zealous Pharisee named Saul, and it says he approved of the killing. This man is about to become the spearhead of the persecution, a key figure in this whole unfolding drama. The persecution was designed to completely extinguish the flame in Jerusalem, right? While it did the exact opposite. As believers fled the city for their lives, they took their message with them, sparking a radical new direction for the entire movement. The plan to contain the sect in Jerusalem just failed, spectacularly. And here's the great irony. The very thing they did to try and crush the movement ended up forcing it into its second ripple. It spread it throughout the surrounding regions of Judea and Samaria, exactly as that opening prophecy had predicted. And who's the man leading this charge? Saul. Oh yeah, he isn't just a passive observer anymore. He's an active agent of destruction. He's going house to house, dragging men and women off to prison. He even gets official letters to expand his hunt to other cities, like Damascus. But on that road to Damascus, Saul's entire world is shattered. He's hit by a light from heaven so bright it literally blinds him. He falls to the ground and hears a voice. The voice of the very man whose followers he was trying so desperately to destroy. In this one moment, the movement's greatest enemy has a head-on collision with its founder. It's interesting, by the way, the text gives us the earliest name for this movement, the Way. It was used by insiders and outsiders alike, and it suggests that this wasn't just a new set of beliefs, but a completely distinct path of life, a specific sect within the broader Jewish world at the time. So after this dramatic conversion, Saul, who becomes known to us as Paul, transforms from persecutor into this story's chief protagonist. And he's the one who carries the message into that third final ripple, to the ends of the earth, the vast, non-Jewish world of the Roman Empire. But this massive expansion would ignite a huge new problem, an identity crisis. See, as Gentiles or non-Jews began to join the way in huge numbers, a fierce debate erupted from inside the movement. Remember, it was born entirely within Judaism. So the big question was, did these new converts need to adopt all the Jewish customs and laws like circumcision to truly belong? To solve this identity crisis, the leaders all come together for a major council in Jerusalem. And after some really intense debate, they reach a landmark decision. No, Gentiles do not need to become culturally Jewish. This ruling was, and it's hard to overstate this, one of the most important moments in the movement's history. It's what paved the way for it to become a truly global religion, not just a Jewish sect. And you can literally see the energy of the movement shift. It moves from its original center in Jerusalem to this new, dynamic hub in a city called Antioch. This was a major international city where, for the first time, believers were called Christians, and it became the launching pad for all the missions into the wider Roman world. But this expansion was anything but easy. Paul's message didn't just challenge religious ideas, it seriously disrupted local economies. For example, in Philippi, he frees a slave girl from a fortune-telling spirit, which makes her owners furious because they just lost their source of income. They have him beaten and jailed. Then in Ephesus, his preaching against idols threatens the massive local trade in silver shrines to the goddess Artemis, and that sparks a full-blown riot that engulfs the entire city. So after years of traveling the known world, planting these new communities, and facing down riots and prisons, Paul, the great ambassador to the non-Jewish world, makes a fateful decision. He's going back to Jerusalem. His friends, his followers, they all plead with him not to go. Prophets literally warn him. One guy even takes Paul's belt, ties up his own hands and feet with it, and says, "This is what's going to happen to you." But Paul is driven, absolutely convinced he must return to the city where it all began, the very place where his own journey as a persecutor started. And wouldn't you know it, the warnings were spot on. In Jerusalem, he's immediately falsely accused of defiling the temple. A mob forms in an instant, dragging him out with the intent to kill him. Roman soldiers have to intervene just to save his life, and in the process, they arrest him. Now he's a prisoner, and he soon finds out that a band of more than 40 men have taken a secret oath to ambush and assassinate him. And this is the insane cliffhanger where the book of Acts leaves us. Paul is in custody, trapped between the fury of his own people and the cold, pragmatic power of the Roman Empire. With its greatest champion now completely neutralized, you're left wondering, could this fragile global movement possibly survive?